Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from YellowCat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers, judges, etc. of Reddit. What's the dumbest thing you've heard someone try to legally justify? Buddy working graveyard shift as a gas station got robbed. Police caught the guys. He had to testify as a witness and I had to drive him to court. So I hung out in the courtroom during the trial. One of the guys, acting as his own defense attorney, called the other guy to the stand and asked him, "When we robbed the gas station, was I there?" The whole courtroom face-palmed. I had a guy call me to tell me he wasn't going to be in court because he was getting his hair cut. I asked him if he was serious. He said yes. I told him he was going to have an order for his arrest out if he didn't appear. He hung up. Standard not a lawyer, but my lawyer, who is defending me for a speeding ticket, family friend, gave me the option to stay with him and watch his defense of his second case because he said it would be a good one. My lawyer buddy was defending a man who was brought up on his 6th DUI charge. Now, the lawyer explained to me that there is no way he could win this case because, let's face it, the judge does not really have sympathy on the 6th go-around. The lawyer's hand was forced, and he decided to have a bit of fun with it. His opening statement: "We are here due to Mr. X's 6th DUI charge, and I think we can all look around this room and deep down at ourselves and ask, who hasn't been there?" The judge thought it was pretty funny, but the prosecution was really peed off. Completely not what you're looking for, but I love telling this story. A couple years ago, I saw a purse snatching on a Friday night in the East Village. The East Village is busy as H on a Friday night, and there were a good 6 guys, myself included, ready to tackle this guy. No idea what he was thinking, but someone tackles him. The guy gets up, throws the purse down, and says, "It wasn't me. It wasn't even me." Literally right after we all watched it happen and the guy get tackled. What a moron. I was on a jury for a case in which someone was being tried for assaulting a police officer. There was a chase during which the cop slipped and broke his foot. After the suspect was caught, the officer told his partner he thought his foot was broken. The suspect then shouted, "F that foot!" and stomped on the officer's broken foot. His defense claimed that he simply slipped and landed on the cop's foot by accident, and his exclamation of "F that foot" was simply a coincidence. This defense attorney also fell asleep during the trial and was literally snoring audibly until the judge stopped the trial to reprimand him. Your Honor, I felt really bad for the officer after he had fallen and said, "F that foot," at which point I attempted to point at the foot in question with my toe since I was handcuffed at the time and couldn't use my hands. The ground was very slippery, you see, as evidenced by the fact that this poor noble officer had already fallen. As a result of this Teflon-coated sidewalk, I slipped while my foot was right over the officer's broken foot and, well, you know the rest. Okay, now let me explain how that kilo of cocaine found its way up my a-hole. My friend's father is a defense attorney, and one of his stories always made me laugh. He was defending a man who had broken into a store. I think it was a convenience store. His plan was to sneak onto the roof of the building and break in through a trapdoor or something. The roof was bad, and so during his planned robbery, he fell through the roof, landed on the counter in front of the woman who owned the store, and was promptly apprehended. In court, the woman was asked to identify the man who had attempted to rob her store. She pointed directly to the suspect, saying it was him. Hearing this, the man jumps up and shouts, "Your Honor, that's impossible! There's no way she could have seen it was me. I was covered in soot." He lost the case. Pretty much all sovereign citizens' arguments. American law doesn't run on the open sesame principle, where a few magic words will open legal backdoors. But the best was a client electing to go pro se and claimed immunity via a Native American treaty. Although the treaty had expired in the 1870s, he wasn't a Native American. He said he was adopted in jail by someone of that tribe, and the treaty's terms didn't grant him immunity anyway. His argument failed, and he's looking at 150 years just in enhancements for 12 armed robberies and a bunch of assaults with no good defense on the facts. Oh my god, I had a client in Fed custody in New Jersey who got some of that brainworm "renounce my citizen" BS in his head, and I spent a solid 2 hours of my life explaining that he was not a Moor and subject to international treaty, and that the entirety of the United States was not actually a fiction, and that committing a Hobbs Act burglary in New Jersey meant that you were gonna go to prison. He was sure that if he told the judge at sentencing that he could trace his family line back to some invasion 1,000 years ago, that the judge would be forced to set him free. Mother effer thought this and said it was his plan. He still believes that I am in on it, that my oath to uphold the law and the land means that I routinely sell out poor black men that resort to forcibly robbing teenagers at gunpoint. Have I said too much? The lizard people are coming! I was charged with assaulting a police officer. Without a warrant, the police, who had been called to my neighbor's house, broke into my house while I was sleeping. They handcuffed me, beat me, and pushed me headfirst down a flight of stairs, still cuffed. I was charged because the cop who pushed me down the stairs injured himself in the process. What happened? The charge was obviously tossed out. My bail bondsman heavily implied that the cops charge fake felonies like this all the time. Promotions are based on felony arrests, not convictions, and they get a cut of the bond. $50,000 bond, you pay the bondsman $5,000 to avoid rotting in jail for a month awaiting trial. He kicks back 25% to the cops. $1,250 isn't bad for a few hours of work. This is part of why excessive bonds are unconstitutional. I am not a lawyer, but I once sat in court for a probation violation hearing where I watched someone try to justify failing a UA for cocaine. His defense? I wasn't using cocaine, Your Honor. I was just rocking it up to sell. That's how it got in my system. Instead of just admitting he had a problem with coke and going to treatment, he blatantly admitted to manufacturing/distributing crack cocaine. He went back to prison. I also once saw a PV hearing where a guy had gotten a violation for missing his appointment with his probation officer. His excuse? He was an illegal immigrant and had been deported and therefore unable to attend. It checked out. He went back to prison though. Guy in traffic court. In the case of speeding, how do you plea? I refuse to plea. What do you mean? Texas Driver's Code of Conduct is not a legislative law of the land, it's a contractual agreement that does not apply to me, for I am not a driver as defined by the state of Texas as a person who operates a motor vehicle in a commercial capacity. I am a traveler operating my private conveyance on public road, and I do not need your permission to do so, nor am I subject to your commercial code of conduct. Judge, ordinarily you'd be correct, however, you have a driver's license, and in that voluntary contract, you agreed to abide by our codes and policies and be subject to our jurisdiction, and since you offer no evidence in your defense and instead want to argue legal semantics, I find you guilt in the amount of $255. Thank you, Your Honor. May I discharge my debt to the state with yet another obligation? I beg your pardon? Can I pay you with an IOU or scrip drawn upon a private bank? No! Thank you, Your Honor. Then what am I to pay you with? Cash. You get it at the bank. I'm very sorry, Your Honor, but I've been to the bank and they don't have dollar bills. All they have are Federal Reserve notes, which legally are instruments of debt and carry with it an equity attachment. Since I can't discharge my debt to the state with yet another paper obligation, what am I to pay you with? Gold and silver? You can pay me with either. Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please explain to the court how 1 is equal to 38? I beg your pardon? Well, you see, Your Honor, it takes 38 as these green dollar bills to buy one of these silver dollars, and you said that I can discharge my debt to the state with 255 of either. So can you please explain for the court record and my benefit how you consider the two are equal? The judge stands up and bangs the gavel and yells, "You go sit down with the prosecutor, and whatever he comes up with, I'm gonna sign." A guy came into my office and asked me to sue the sheriff and the prosecutor in this small town for wrongful arrest and malicious prosecution, respectively. The reason he was arrested was because he is a convicted S offender and he went to a grade school to have lunch with his niece and nephew. He was arrested for being a registered S offender while loitering in a community safety zone. He said that loitering was defined as staying without a clear purpose, and his purpose was to have lunch with his niece and nephew. He was convicted and sent to jail. He appealed, lost the appeal, fled a civil lawsuit against the county, lost that, and wanted me to appeal the lawsuit. Not me, not even a lawyer, but a friend of mine who was working at the public defender's office while in law school. He was tasked with coming up with something to give a client a good faith defense. The problem being that the accused was caught on video beating a corrections officer. The DA decided to throw the book at the guy and charged the defendant with riot in a penal institution. After duly checking the chain of evidence, all in order, and making sure there wasn't even the barest hint that the defendant had reason to believe he was defending himself, there wasn't, but he thought, well, it's just one guy. Is that really a riot? But yes, one person can indeed be a riot. But you see, a county jail in the statute of that state is not considered a penal institution. So the dumbest thing he's ever seen someone try to get away with in a courtroom was something he himself did. When the date of the trial came, he and the public defender stood up and demanded that the charges be dropped. The DA and the very visibly crippled for life CO contained their incredulous outbursts of outrage, and the judge asks why. Your Honor, the jail is not a penal institution. My friend says what followed was an hour-long in my chambers now session where both prosecution and defense were given a thorough A-reaming by the judge for the gross miscarriage of justice. But the charges were dropped. I am a law student and I spent the summer interning with a small-town prosecutor. There were some gems. One woman's defense for kicking an old man on the bus was that it was self-defense because he invaded her spiritual V by sitting on the bus. There was another repeat offender that I will call Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is a mean old man that lives up in the hills and refuses to pay taxes, among other illegal acts, because he claims that his land is a sovereign nation called Jonesville. Every time he gets arrested for letting his horses run free, a crime in my state, building a fence across a public road, threatening passerbys, etc., he handwrites briefs to the court on Republic of Jonesville stationery. Each one is a rambling manifesto about how he isn't subject to state law and how the prosecutors have it out for old Mr. Jones. There's a filing cabinet measuring about 5 by 3 by 3 in the prosecutor's office filled with this man's incoherent chicken scratch writing. For the record, this kind of defense doesn't work. It's the legal equivalent of sticking your fingers in your ears and yelling la 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 la. Then the judge promptly says guilty and sentences you to anger management classes. Got called in for jury duty one time. There was a couple dozen of us in the trial room being vetted to choose 12 of us for the case. They come up to one kid, had to have been just 18 years old. The prosecutor is going through the same questions she'd asked everyone else, then she comes up with an unexpected question. Do you recall what you placed on your jury summons form for your occupation? He replied that he didn't recall. Turns out that he put pimp as his occupation. She raked him over the coals about it, talking about how it was perjury to falsify the information. Talked about the fines and jail time he could face, the whole 9 yards. She closed with, therefore, I wish to dismiss Fred Smith from this jury. He either knowingly perjured himself on the juror forms or has engaged felonious activities by coordinating P, which is illegal in this state. The kid was either very dumb or had some pretty large jewels in order to do that. He's lucky he didn't end with a fine or something, or maybe he did after the fact. Ultimately, 12 jurors were selected before my number was called, and I decided to go back to work rather than sit and watch the case. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all of the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.